in environmental matters in Latin America and the Caribbean, known as Escazú, supports the implementation of the 2030 Agenda by devoting specific attention to peoples and groups in vulnerable situations. Achieving balanced integration of economic, social, and environmental aspects of development has proven essential for sustainable future of our planet and for both present and future generations. The global commitment for sustainable development is the driving force behind Agenda 2030, and the rights of access to information, public participation, access to justice in environmental matters plays a crucial role in the sustainable development equation. They are a cornerstone of all democratic societies and essential to environmental stewardship. Guaranteeing these rights enhances the ability of governments to respond to public concerns and demands and is fundamental to addressing inequality and advancing environmentally sustainable development. These rights ensure not only that environmental problems disproportionately affecting vulnerable persons and groups are addressed, but also that the needs of these groups are appropriately considered. During the last decade, ECLAC has placed equality at the core of development. Is a non-negotiable ethical principle from a rights-based perspective. In ECLAC's view, equality stands at the center of development for two reasons. Firstly, because it imbues policies with a rights-based approach in their most fundamental fashion. And secondly, because equality is also a prerequisite for progress and development that adequately balances the three dimensions of sustainable development for present and future generations, and that seeks to strengthen democracy and full citizenship. Thus, the reduction of inequality is not just an ethical imperative, it is also a prerequisite for the effectiveness and efficiency needed to achieve sustainable development, to ensure that no one is left behind. Inequality is a barrier to development. Despite recent progress, Latin America and the Caribbean continues to be the most unequal region in the world in terms of the distribution of income among its population. It is also beset by gendered, racial, ethnic, and territorial inequalities, inevitably leaving various groups behind. Let me explain how inequality is expressed in terms of the environment. Today, it is more evident than ever that environmental degradation at both the local and global levels has a more severe impact on disadvantaged groups. The most disadvantaged sectors of the population are also the most likely to suffer from disease associated with exposure to toxic products, waste, polluted air, water, and from the deterioration or shortage of the natural resources on which they depend for survival. The poor are also more vulnerable to extreme weather events, which tend to worsen with climate change. Therefore, access rights that ensure that people, particularly the poorest and most vulnerable, are active participants rather than passive recipients in decision-making in terms of poverty eradication and social development is absolutely essential. Latin America and the Caribbean has been especially active in the development of environmental access rights. As you know, on the 4th of March 2018, the Escazú Agreement was adopted in Costa Rica with the active participation of 24 countries. To date, the agreement has been signed, as Carol has said, by 17 countries, ratified by Guyana on April 18th this year, the first country in the region to do so. And I know that many of the countries in the region are also currently completing their internal processes to ensure that they're able also to sign and ratify this Escazú Agreement. It is the first environmental treaty of Latin America and the Caribbean, the only one thus far emerging from Rio+20, and the first in the world to specifically address the protection of human rights defenders. Its main beneficiaries are the people of our region, particularly the most vulnerable groups and communities. It aims to ensure the rights of all persons to be informed in a timely and adequate manner, to participate significantly in the decisions that affect their lives and their environment, and to find redress and remedy when such rights have been infringed. The regional agreement contributes to charting the pathway towards a new development model that tackles the region's unsustainable culture of fragmented interests. The Escazú Agreement is an agreement among states, but it is also a compact between each state and its society. Above all, it is an agreement for citizens, made by the people, for the people. It recognizes and develops fundamental democratic rights and places equality at the center of development. It seeks to include all sectors of society in tackling challenges of paramount importance, such as climate change, natural disasters, desertification, biodiversity loss. The Escazú Agreement focuses on persons and groups in vulnerable situations, leaving no one behind. It is a cornerstone in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. So this agreement, first in the world to establish legally binding provisions on human rights defenders in environmental matters, also reminds us that to protect our environment, we have to protect those that defend it. Escazú is also for them. For those that sadly left us in their fight for a better future, for greater dignity and well-being, and for those that are at this very moment suffering threats, attacks, and intimidation, the Escazú Agreement is for them. Far from forgetting them, the agreement brings to the fore this dramatic situation that our region is undergoing, and it offers a beacon of hope. The theme of this year's HLPF, empowering people and ensuring inclusiveness and equality, is the essence of the Escazú Agreement. Therefore, through Escazú, the Latin American and Caribbean region is particularly well placed to provide leadership and guidance on the way forward that would help accelerate implementation of Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, empowering people and societies for the greater well-being, inclusiveness, and equality of our world. I thank you so much. And now I would love to give the floor to Ambassador Rodrigo Carazo, the nominated representative of Costa Rica to the United Nations Ambassador. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Diane, and you have a tough act to follow in representing Alicia Bárcenas. And you did very, very well, and thank you very much. Alicia is at the heart of the advancement of the Escazú Agreement and has been at the heart, together with all of that enthusiastic engagement that's written here that they have put into the advancement of this Escazú Agreement stands for the hopes that it will soon materialize into a fully fledged international agreement in full force. So it's a very important issue for us in Costa Rica and for our region to hold this side event with such distinguished company and your presence, which we certainly appreciate very much. And as mentioned before, and it's never too much, complimenting St. Vincent and the Grenadines for signing the agreement last Friday, and complimenting also and somehow wishing to follow Guyana for being the first state party to this agreement. We must all have our legislative bodies put all the enthusiasm necessary in order to ratify it and get the necessary ratifications for the agreement to come into force. However, in Costa Rica, it isn't in full force. Why? Because there have been previous agreements that have mentioned that whatever the country goes out and signs, if it relates to human rights, it is above any type of domestic law. Thus, the Escazú agreement, referring to fundamental human rights, is in full force, despite the fact of not having been yet ratified by Congress and not having the agreement itself attained the necessary ratifications to enter into force. This Escazú agreement, by the way, Escazú is the name of my hometown, and therefore I feel twice as satisfied that we celebrate its existence today. This agreement empowers people and ensures inclusiveness and equality. Empowers people, as Diane was mentioning, to defend the environment and to defend our livelihood, the planet in which we live. I was, we call it in our region, defender of people, national institution of defense of human rights. The first one in Costa Rica back 26 years ago. And we began to expand on that figure so that it will be present in more regions, in more countries of the region. And one of our first tasks on that moment was that of precisely protecting the life of our colleagues in some other countries in the region, because they were being assailed and prosecuted by groups, governments, entities within their own governments. And we were able to strengthen the institution in the continent and go on to further defend people who are, protect people who are defending human rights and defending the environment. Last Friday, we were sitting in a hall at the Ford Foundation called on the name of Berta Cáceres, and that strikes us intensively as we remember one more fighter, one more defender, one more protector of environment and of human rights that has been sacrificed in the cause. Yes, this is the agreement and the putting it into action would definitely help or has provisions that are fundamental. It says for at least 80 targets of the 2030 agenda. SDG 3, SDG 6, SDG 7, 10, 12. And not only that, but it makes it possible for us who believe in the principles of the agreement and for the countries of the region to engage in actions such as the ones that are being devised for the Climate Action Summit, which will take place in the month of September as a highlight of the General Assembly's inauguration week on the first day of that week, in which we expect to enhance and accelerate our national determined contributions by 2020, but not only on that day. Yes, we count on keeping up the thrust towards the pre-COP that will take place in Costa Rica in the month of October, the COP that will take place in Chile in the month of November, is it? And perhaps very important for all of us here to be followed up very intensively, because ECLAC's plan of action for 2020 has the enhancement of NDCs, of national determined contributions throughout the region, as one of its main objectives. And Costa Rica will be president of ECLAC during that year, and we have this task of keeping the promotion or the enhancement of ambitions with the support and in the company of all the countries of the region. Yes, we think about public action in environmental matters as global, as being of global common concern, as the SDG 17 and global partnership is, and it requires exchanges, capacity building, synergies and alliances between our countries and with all the relevant stakeholders. Believe me, we've strived hard, very, very hard, together with many other countries, to have many of these provisions contained in what will come out of the Climate Action Day here in September, and of the events following that summit, as events that I've listed before. We're very proud of the Escazú agreement with Costa Rica, and we in the region should be very proud, because this is a vivid contribution of the region to the discussion, to the global environmental discussion, and it is an example of what can be done, of what has to be done through a multilateral dialogue, through consciousness, and through determination, while protecting, and this is very, very important for us in the region, by protecting both the access to public information and protecting all of those people who are involved in protecting the whole environment in our region. We have to continue building upon what we have attained with the Escazú agreement. We have to continue getting the necessary signatures, the pending signatures to the treaty of those countries in the region that have not done so. We will continue in it, and we will continue with the support of these coalitions and these alliances they have made up for the Escazú agreement, which of course is what makes it a living being, one that is trusted and trusted in order to be as effective as it occurs. Costa Rica, and I attest to that as a permanent representative at the United Nations, Costa Rica is fully committed to the full and effective application of what for us is a landmark instrument. We will keep on striving for it, and appreciate very, very much what your company in organizing and in attending to this side event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And you remind me, in fact, that Costa Rica is indeed a most fitting country to have hosted the conclusion of this agreement. You have a sterling tradition of democracy, and, as you put it, defending the people and promoting human rights. I think it was one of your past presidents who earned a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
For example.
Yes.
So Costa Rica is, in fact, and your hometown of Escazú, absolutely appropriate. Gotta put that in. Excellent leadership from Costa Rica. I look forward to your chairmanship, your presidency of the session beginning next year, for the work that we continue in ECLAC. I would like now, colleagues, to introduce the first member of our panel. She is Miss Yineth Balanta. She's president of the Community Council in the village of Yolombo, Suarez, Colombia. She's one of 28 women who, along with the Francia Marquez, who was recognized with the Goldman Prize, and who also, I think, was a candidate for the Environmental Nobel Prize, works to protect their ancestral lands from illegal gold mining. She works to protect, she's a member of the Movilización de Mujeres Negras por el Cuidado de la Vida y los Territorios Ancestrales. She's going to speak in Spanish, but we have circulated copies of her statement in English so that you will appreciate her words. Ms. Balanta, tiene la palabra.
Gracias. Un ancestral saludo para todos y todas. Soy Gine Balantamina, una mujer que me autorreconozco como afrodescendiente. Crecí en la vereda Yolombó, Consejo Comunitario de La Toma, municipio de Suárez, en las montañas del Cauca, al suroccidente colombiano, en medio del conflicto armado, el racismo estructural impartido por el Estado colombiano, en medio del conflicto armado y las políticas de muerte implementadas en nombre del desarrollo y la erradicación de la pobreza, megaproyectos inconsultos que nos han sometido a condiciones de miseria y empobrecimiento, a la destrucción del medio ambiente, al desconocimiento de nuestra identidad cultural como pueblos afrodescendientes y al despojo de los territorios ancestrales comprados con trabajos en las minas y haciendas esclavistas después de la abolición legal de la esclavitud. El territorio para nuestra comunidad ha sido de gran importancia. Es nuestro espacio de vida, nuestro lugar para recrear la cultura, para reafirmar nuestro ser como pueblo negro, como seres humanos. Sin embargo, esto se contrapone con otros que lo ven solo como un espacio donde se pueden tener riquezas acumulativas, lo que nos ha hecho permanecer en constantes procesos de lucha y resistencia. Para los mayores de la comunidad, el territorio es la dignidad, y la dignidad no tiene precio. Desde pequeños nos enseñan que hay que defenderlo como parte de la vida, incluso poniendo en riesgo a veces nuestra propia vida. Llegó a nuestro territorio la minería ilegal, realizada con retroexcavadoras al río Bejas y a otros territorios del norte del Cauca. La comunidad que tiene una conciencia sobre la importancia de cuidar su río, su territorio, se opuso a esta actividad. En tanto, en estos lugares se han generado accidentes donde varias personas de la comunidad han muerto, además de la contaminación del agua con mercurio y cianuro. Todo esto hizo que ante la negativa de parar la minería ilegal, ante la corrupción institucional de funcionarios públicos locales, en 2014 nos organizáramos las mujeres negras para realizar una movilización que la llamamos Movilización de Mujeres Negras por el Cuidado de la Vida y los Territorios Ancestrales, encabezada por la Asociación de Mujeres de la Vereda Yolombó, la cual implicó caminar más de 300 kilómetros desde el Cauca hasta la capital del país, Bogotá, denunciando lo que estaba pasando en nuestro territorio. Esta acción aumentó el riesgo para nosotras, pues a pesar que logramos frenar la minería ilegal e inconstitucional, empezamos a recibir mayores amenazas de muerte y persecución a las mujeres de la comunidad, muchas con grandes afectaciones, incluyendo psicológicas y mentales. El gobierno uribista, que ganó las elecciones presidenciales, desde su campaña planteó hacer trizas el acuerdo de paz. Esto se ha traducido en el asesinato sistemático de líderes sociales y de guerrilleros de las FARC, quienes hemos estado defendiendo el territorio, el medio ambiente y la paz. Constantemente estamos recibiendo amenazas de muerte contra nuestras vidas y las de nuestras familias por parte de grupos paramilitares. Justo el viernes pasado, 12 de julio, nuevamente hubo amenazas contra líderes del Consejo Comunitario La Toma en el municipio de Suárez, Cauca, diciendo que les daban 72 horas para que salieran del territorio y si no, nos acababan. Ahora les pongo en conocimiento para que nos ayuden y se haga visible la situación que estamos viviendo en Colombia, los defensores de la vida, del territorio y del agua. Al señor presidente Iván Duque, por medio de ustedes, quisiera decirle, proteja inmediatamente al territorio, las comunidades y los líderes afrodescendientes de La Toma y Suárez, Cauca. Faltan 4 horas para el final del plazo que nos dieron. Desplazarse no es una opción, ser asesinados tampoco para nosotros. En abril del 2018, Francia Márquez recibió el premio Goldman del Medio Ambiente, reconocido como el Nobel Ambiental, el mismo que recibió Berta Cáceres en Honduras, por oponerse a la gran minería. Sin embargo, ella fue asesinada. Por mi parte, a pesar de los riesgos, considero que este premio ha sido muy importante para las comunidades afrocolombianas, indígenas y campesinas, que resisten al despojo territorial y al modelo económico de muerte. Ha inspirado a los jóvenes en Colombia para luchar por cuidar el medio ambiente, a las mujeres para usar su amor maternal, su instinto de cuidado, para desde la juntanza cuidar la casa grande. Yo por lo pronto considero que debo continuar apoyando a mi comunidad, al proceso y al resto de mi familia, que todos los días luchamos en este país para que un día la situación de inequidad y desigualdad, para que el racismo, el patriarcado y sobre todo las políticas de muerte, un día la podamos transformar en una política que cuide la vida, que respete el medio ambiente y la casa grande. Es de vital importancia la protección de los estados para los defensores ambientales y por eso es tan importante que todos los estados se comprometan con el acuerdo de Escazú. Es necesario que para el caso de Colombia, el gobierno además garantice los derechos étnico-territoriales, las órdenes que la Corte Constitucional ha emitido, la ley de víctimas y para el caso de nosotros los afrodescendientes, el decreto ley 4635. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Muchas gracias, señora Milita Balanta. Muchas gracias especial por tu liderazgo de lucha de gran importancia. Muchas gracias. I would like now to give the floor to Veronica Bustamante, Counselor in the Permanent Mission of Peru to the United Nations. I love you will now explain to our colleagues present how Peru is making progress towards ratification and implementation of Escazú. Excellency, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Diane, and I would also like to thank the Permanent Mission of Costa Rica and the other organizers of this important event. As you all know, Peru is one of the countries with the greatest biodiversity biodiversity in the world. And it's because of this particular wealth that it has had an active participation in initiatives that promote and contribute to the achievement of sustainable development. For this reason, it was important for our country to participate since its inception in 2012 in the entire negotiation process of the declaration of the application of Principle 10 of the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development to build a common vision, plan of action, and regional agreement on access right in environmental matters. Unlike Costa Rica, our ratification procedure is a little bit more complicated. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is in the process of concluding the internal legal evaluation of this instrument. As a preliminary step, almost 15 of the national institutions that have competence in the subject matter of the agreement have been consulted. All of them have expressed their favorable opinion for its ratification. After the Parliament's approval, Peru will be ready to ratify this regional instrument. Now I would like to talk about the developments on the implementations of the provisions of the agreement. The Escazú agreement represents an opportunity for Peru because it allows consolidating and strengthening the practices contained in the national framework related to access to information, public participation, and access mechanisms to environmental justice. It also encourages cooperation among states and capacity building with a view to having a common standard for the implementation of access rights. Our national framework already contains extensive regulation regarding access rights. For example, our political constitution recognizes fundamental rights related to access rights as well as to enjoy a balanced and adequate environment. The National Environmental Policy enshrines the right to information, participation in environmental management, and environmental justice. Regarding access to environmental information and public participation in environmental decision-making processes, there is the National Environmental Information System, a network that facilitates the systematization, access, and distribution of environmental information, as well as its use and exchange. The regulation on transparency, access to environmental public information, and participation in citizen consultation in environmental matters, and the regulation of the law of transparency and access to public information. Regarding access to justice in environmental matters, we have access to justice at an administrative and judicial level through bodies such as the Environmental Assessment and Enforcement Agency and the Specialized Prosecutor's Office in Environmental Matters. Also, environmental justice modules in key regions with rich biodiversity and big presence of indigenous peoples, such as Madre de Dios and Pucallpa. It should be noted that in Peru there is a National Plan for Human Rights 2018-2021 and a protocol to guarantee the protection of human rights defenders. This protocol established actions, procedures, and measures to generate an adequate environment at the national level, so that the people dedicated to the defense of human rights can develop their activities freely and in accordance with national and international law. This is an important step forward in our legislation that ultimately contributes to consolidating our legislation according to the content of the Escazú Agreement, and in particular, Article 9, which refers to human rights defenders in environmental matters. Finally, reaffirming Peru's commitment to promote transparency, access to information, and effective and inclusive participation within the framework of the preparation of the Framework Law on Climate Change, a participatory, multi-level, and multi-actor process called Dialoguemos is in place to collect contributions from the public sector, indigenous people, civil society, youth, private sector, NGOs, and academia. In addition, recognizing the importance of ensuring the well-being and participation of the most vulnerable populations, such as indigenous people. The process of prior consultation with indigenous peoples has also been carried out for the approval of this regulation, so that the important vision and inputs of these people is included to address the problem of climate change. The law has the gender equality, intergenerational, human rights, and intercultural approaches in order to take into account their interests and needs. Peru is committed to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Escazú Agreement is a great contribution to the 2030 Agenda, particularly to SDG 16, which refers to promoting peaceful societies for sustainable development, facilitating access to justice for all, and creating effective, responsible, and inclusive institutions at all levels. It should be noted that the objectives of this agreement also contribute to the frontal fight against corruption, which is one of the main objectives of the current government. For all these reasons, Peru is a country convinced of the importance of access rights in order to achieve sustainable and inclusive development, for which the Escazú Agreement is considered of vital importance for our region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Moving very quickly along, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Gabriela Burdiles. Gabriela is a lawyer and the project director of the NGO FEMA, dedicated to the defense and empowerment of communities affected by environmental conflicts in Chile. Since 2013, she has participated as a member of civil society in negotiations of the Escazú Agreement, especially the pillar on access to environmental justice. And she's also part of the Global Legal Empowerment Network convened by NAMATI. So, Gabrielle, I'd like to invite you to explain the main barriers that vulnerable groups face when trying to access justice in environmental matters, and how Escazú has set new standards for overcoming those barriers. You have the floor.
Hola, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Diane, for that presentation. And thank you to the co-organizers and especially to NAMATI for this invitation. Today I will try to answer two questions in this presentation. First, as you said, Diane, what are the main barriers that vulnerable groups face every day when they try to get to the judiciary or to access to justice in environmental matters? And then how Escazú sets standards in this issue. So my first point is, what is the meaning of access to environmental justice? And according to international instruments, it guarantees that each person is recognized with the capacity to act before competent institutions established by law to challenge the legality of decisions related to access to information, participation, as well as to request redress for environmental damage. Therefore, access to justice on environmental matters deals with the obligation of the states to remove all those barriers which, for different reasons, prevent persons or victims from having access to judicial, but also to administrative procedures in order to obtain timely and fair solutions. So the second point is, what are these barriers that these people face? And I want to say first that environmental emergencies and environmental cases require timely solution, because if not, the damage is made worse and it can cause irreversible consequences for all people and for the nature. So some barriers that typically impede timely access to justice deals with the lack of knowledge of the judges, or the lack of specialized bodies to deal with these issues, but also with the existence of rules that limitate, for instance, the legal standing, that who can bring these cases to the court. And this is really important, this point, because when we are talking about collective interest and we're talking for the protection of the nature, to not having barriers to the standing. Other barriers, granting inadequate redress to these cases, because monetary compensations are not enough. If we think of a nature damage. The other thing is the lack of flexibility of these rules, the high cost of trials to produce proof in these cases. There are many geographical and linguistic barriers in our region, if we think on rural communities or indigenous communities. And my last point is what Jeanette said in her presentation. There's a lot of violence, threats, and criminalization that these people face when they're trying to bring a case to the court. I can give you the example of Alberto Curamil. It's the 2019 Goldman Prize this year. He's an indigenous Mapuche leader, and he was fighting against to stop two hydroelectric projects and to protect the river. And he was arrested, and now he remains in jail for his environmental activism. So what the Escazú Agreement says about this? We can say that this is the first binding agreement that regulates these matters in our region. And Escazú Agreement has an article that guarantee and state that all the governments have to guarantee the right to access to justice in environmental matters. It also establishes minimum guarantees for access to environmental justice, facilitating mechanisms, and specific support measures for persons and groups in vulnerable situations. So what are these minimum guarantees? To have bodies with access to environmental expertise. It doesn't mention environmental courts, but a specialization of these bodies. To have effective, timely, public, transparent, impartial, and affordable procedures, that's really important. Broad legal standing, to interpret this standing of the people really broadly. Precautionary measures, measures to facilitate the production of proof, mechanisms for timely execution of this decision. And also Escazú had an article for the person and groups in vulnerable situation, and mentioned that governments have to put in place measures to give them free technical and legal assistance. This is a really important point in this matter. And as was mentioned here, Article 9 establishes the protection of environmental defenders. But my point here is that these mechanisms are not new. They are included in many international instruments, and also in the legislation of many countries in our region. There are really good experiences and practices on access to environmental justice. So what Escazú said is that they recognize this experience, recognize these good practices, and recognize that the challenge for our countries is to achieving its full implementation of these standards. That's the main barrier. So how Escazú advanced SDGs? I will focus on SDG 16.3 on access to justice for all. So I would say that the provision of the Escazú Agreement incorporates relevant standards on access to environmental justice, and they are directly linked to the realization of this goal. Indeed, it's the same Escazú Agreement that states in its preamble that the parties have considered the 2030 agenda. The Escazú standards are also a great measure to track the progress of states on achieving SDG 16.3, as the UN indicators, if you look at the indicators of this goal, are tracking issues of criminal justice mainly. So there are some initiatives of the civil society that recognize this. For instance, the Justice for All campaign. I have a sticker here. This is the campaign. It's conducted by different organizations like LAMATI, and it's focused on the achievement of this SDG 16, of access to justice for all. And it's also helping to coordinate and advocate for initiatives like the Escazú Agreement at the international level to call for the protection of grassroots justice defenders. Also, another example is FEMA, with the support of the MATI, are developing a shadow report on access to environmental justice in Chile based on the Escazú standard. And I can share these results later with you. So, in 3 words, as Carol asked us, I couldn't find just one word. That Escazú for me is justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. Colleagues, we have about a half an hour to share your own views and ideas on this important agreement and what it means to your societies, to the groups that you represent. I hope that you will make this a very lively, interactive discussion. I think that there is much food for thought. I was really very struck by the contribution that was made by Ms. Galanta on the challenges that the people of her community in Colombia face, and also important those efforts that are being made through the legal system to strengthen our protection of groups such as UNES. I want to open the floor to get your comments on the presentations that have been made, but also to give you an opportunity to share your own experiences and views on this agreement. I invite you to identify yourself so that we can record who is speaking. So the floor is open. Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Carla Rivera. I'm from El Salvador. Thank you, Ms. Diane and Ambassador Rodrigo Carrasco, for convening this meeting. I think it's very important to be part of this event. Thank you to everyone for the excellent presentation. I had the opportunity to be in ECLAT to be part of an international law course. And I had the opportunity to know what was the process for the Escazú. It was very important to know that we, El Salvador, was part of all the process, that the capacity building, to know about how is construction all the document in this important treaty. Unfortunately, we are not part yet for this agreement. But I think ECLAT had a very interesting challenges in this. The process was very important, but the government was challenging. The governments, our policies in our region, they have periods and they have new policies too, and it's important that we be part of these new challenges. In this regard, I think we have different challenges, and one of these is exactly connection with the Agenda 2030. This is very important because every country is part of this challenge. Every country to be part, how we can employ the development agenda in our countries. And in the environmental is the most important for the heart. It's in transversal issue, and that regard is very important to implement. Another part is important is how is the experience for another country. It's very important that Gabriela told about the experience. It's very important to know how in my country, in our country, how it is working. How is Escazú working? How is Escazú meaning in another country? How is development in this? For that, in that regard, it's very important that the countries that is not part of this know about it. Knowing the experience is very necessary to this. Recognize this good practice is good for everybody. Costa Rica have very good example in this, and we are neighbor. We are very close neighbor. Why not we can take this experience to implement this? We have all the good volunteer to try to still to work in this. It's very important to my country, it's very important to my society, and we wanted to try to continue work with this. Thank you so much, Ekla, for this, Ambassador, and for everyone to take me this opportunity to talk about this, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Canada. That was extremely valuable, important to remind, I think, all of us of the link between Agenda 2030 and implementation of the SDGs and Escazú. Escazú actually really does reinforce an important dimension of Agenda 2030. The whole business of a participatory approach to development, ensuring that no one is left behind. This is the essence of Agenda 2030, and this is what Escazú is. I think it's an extremely important point for us to bear in mind. And the whole issue of capacity building, which I really hadn't thought about, but it is so important because people will not be able to make the best of Escazú without that support, without having that access to the courts, without being able to have the legal support. And an important element of it, which I think has been raised so far, I've heard so many different examples in my own country, Jamaica, of the legal process going through, but when you get to the point of what we want, I don't want to call it punishment, but trying to see justice done. The decisions that are taken in order to meet up with justice are archaic, the punishment so negligible that it is not, it doesn't discourage repetition. This is also something that needs to be considered. How we update and upgrade the punishment meted out, or the decisions taken to ensure that we have a more permanent solution identified. Anyone else ready to take the floor? One more here, and then over here.
Mine is a question, not a comment. But I'm just interested, the ambassador made some remarks around COP.
Name?
Oh, Stacey Crunch from the Mountains. The ambassador made remarks around the COP taking place for the first time in the region. And I'm just, the links are very clear between Escazú and the SDGs, but with this meeting happening in Santiago later this year, what are some of the opportunities that exist to kind of bring these three agendas together and to really use this meeting in the region to drive forward Escazú, the SDGs, and the climate agreement?
Excellent question. And I'm going to ask Ambassador, you want to give a shot? Shall we take the other, give you a chance to think about it? Let me take another question.
Hi, my name is Rosaria. I'm from Peru, and I represent a youth organization called the Millennials Movement. We are currently the regional focal point for the major group of children and youth for Latin America and the Caribbean, for the Latin America and the Caribbean region. And my question goes on the frame of how do we engage youths from the region in order to advocate, in order to support implementation of the Escazú agreement at the national and regional level. This year in April, we, with other youth leader organizations and with the support of ECLAC, we were able to organize a youth forum 1 week previous the forum for the Latin American and Caribbean Countries Forum for Sustainable Development, and the youths in the region were able to engage other youths. We engaged 2,000 youths in 18 countries, and we delivered a statement with recommendations. And one of the youth's recommendations was to ratify the Escazú agreement. So there is an intention from youths to be engaged, to be part. But how do we truly engage these youths in all the processes? Because it's something, climate change and this kind of climate justice is not only affecting our generation, it's affecting our generation, and it's affecting us now. So we want to be engaged now. Thank you.
Your name again?
Rosario.
Rosario. Thank you very much, Rosario. Very, very important. We talk about intergenerational and intergenerational equity. We are here protecting the future of our planet for you, for the youth, for the people of tomorrow, for the leaders of tomorrow. So the role of youth in these decision making is absolutely critical. I can tell you that in the Caribbean we have started engaging with youth through an online platform. We bring all the 26 countries that we engage in the Caribbean. I don't know what happens in the wider Latin America. I think your question goes beyond the issue of mobilization of youth to see how the youth impact the decision making and the policies. That really depends on the level of engagement at the state level, and this is where we talk about the importance of a participatory approach, of ensuring that the state provides the opening, the avenue. Escazú will do that. I think that once we have greater levels of ratification and a greater level of awareness of the importance of this, the 2030 agenda, everything happens incrementally. I'm going to allow other members of the panel to respond to you, but we certainly in the Caribbean are very, very hopeful that youth will begin to take an increasingly more active role in decision making, particularly on these environmental matters. But it's step by step. And the important thing is that you remain engaged and you continue to make your voice heard. Ambassador Grasso, are you ready?
Yes.
Yes. Stacey.
Well, the high-level political forum, this high-level political forum tends to empower people and ensure inclusiveness and equality. Well, that's written there. That's written there. And how do we transform that into reality? When I was here in Rosario speaking on how can youth be involved in these issues, don't you ever ask, rather, how can you get us involved in what you want? When you have decided you want as a country, as a community, as a planet. And who is at fault is not the youth, it's those which are not necessarily involved, engaged, of ages above that of yours. I think the youth has the youth of your country, of my country, of our region, are very clear in what they want, and they're very clear in telling us what we have messed up with and what our previous generations have done to the planet. So inclusiveness, let them open those doors and stop standing in your way. Perhaps, yes, push us, get us aside, and then get going. The things that you have to be very clear. This morning we're discussing about the modification of the Security Council of the United Nations and how to get different levels of representation. I said that we've been discussing that for 25 years. I was corrected by a guy that was older than me. He said, no, it's not 25, it's more than that. It's more than 25 years. You would have solved that in 25 hours to say a big deal. I have no doubt in that. And that leads to the other issue. I mean, how can we spread the word? How can we find the good practices and spread those good practices among in the region and among people? We all of our regions, all of our countries, all of our people have good practices to begin with. Our ancestors and the people who have been in this land for a long time, they know. And they have this long ingrained decisions that will be taken in the Climate Action Summit and the ambition that will be raised next year. All of that will help try to emulate what you young people know that should be done. Tell us and lead us that way. Get us apart.
I have a very practical answer to the question. I mean, I think it's open for the youth groups to join the coalition for the ratification. We very much welcome youth groups joining. There are so many countries in the region. We need to have 11 countries that ratify the agreement. We need 11 countries. We have Guyana so far, which is actually a country that wasn't involved in the original negotiations of the whole agreement. We need 11 other countries to ratify. Bolivia and Uruguay have started to take steps. Well, there are all these other countries, including, of course, Colombia and others who have played a huge role in the negotiation process that we would like them to ratify as soon as possible. So speaking to your national ministries of environment, forming national coalitions, we can link you up with groups who are already working on that issue. I mean, this is really an outreach to other groups who are interested to push. This is an agenda that's not just for the coalition members, it's for all people in the region really to jump on this issue and to use it, because I find with all of these types of agreements, you need to show that movement is happening for there to be, continual numbers of countries that, start the preparation, which takes a long time, as you heard from the speaker from Peru. There's a long process which can, in any government, can get hampered down. So the more that there is a demand at the national level from different sectors, including the youth, I think the better chances are that we can get the ratification and implementation going. These are huge problems in our region around environmental conflict, and you heard about challenges for environmental defenders. The sooner we can get this process started and start actually implementing it better. And I think Gabriela wanted to also jump in here too. I saw you.
Yeah, happy that you mentioned that you can join the coalition. And also I would like to remember this. All this process, the Escazú process, was with the public. We went there, we went to all meetings and participate and submit comments and opinions to have a good agreement. So I think it is open, it's an open process, and it will be like that after when it enter into force. So yeah, just keep in touch and participate.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Yes, please.
Yeah, hi, I'm Krista Orama from the Finnish Ministry for Foreign Affairs. And I used to work in the region of Latin America for quite some time, and there I followed the Escazú Treaty's development. So I think that it was a great development, and now when I'm at the Finnish MFA side, we really wanted to congratulate for this standard. We know that the Aarhus Convention played a model for this treaty, and now we have a new standard that we should use as a model also for other regions. So I think that it's a nice regional interplay on standards related to interlinkages to human rights and environmental affairs, definition of human rights defenders. I think that this treaty really has, as has been said, very many things that we also as Finland stand for, including also rules and standard-based system. So now the question is for us, what can we do to support also the process in Latin America and the Caribbean? I come to think of many things: promote ratification, promote the standard internationally, especially related to human rights defenders and interlinkages, many things. But from your perspective, what could countries, for instance, in Europe or in other regions do in order to support the process in Latin America at this point? Or maybe what are the points that we could learn? And now from an external perspective, I used to be in the region.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent point and very relevant. I invite the members of the panel to think about that, how I can, instinctively capacity building comes to mind, but I leave it to the panelists to make their response to that, I think, very timely comment and inquiry as to how we get support for the region's implementation of this important agreement. from the rest of the international community. I take another question before I invite the panel to respond.
Just a brief comment. I'm Lorena Liendo from Venezuela, representing Sinergia. It's a network of 60 organizations in Venezuela. We share, compartimos tus luchas. We have a big problem with the Orinoco migrant art. Our indigenous people, nuestros indígenas, are fighting with government and against many problems. But the issue is, we know that CLAC is pushing about a regional agenda for social development, linked with the 2030 agenda. We think that maybe Venezuela is not signatory yet of the Escazú agreement. We want to push as a civil society organization to remind our government and our authorities the importance of the participate in the agreement. And we are making a very efforts within the country with our allies. And we think that linking the regional agenda of the CLAC is impulsing and linking with the 2030 agenda, it will be a great opportunity to us to achieve that goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miranda. This is also important, and as we acknowledged, this issue of environmental justice really does impact profoundly across Latin America and the Caribbean, the welfare of indigenous persons and communities in rural areas, particularly on issues regarding land and natural resources. It really is something that is truly deserving of our dedicated attention and support. I thought I saw one other hand in the back. Over here, yes?
Toby Memo from the Center for Law and Democracy in Canada. If we look at the details of the Escazú Agreement, I mean, considering that it's a treaty that's been signed by so many states and hopefully be ratified, I mean, it is very, very impressive. But at the same time, and looking specifically at the access to information provisions, which is more my area of expertise, some of the standards there, I think, are lower. And as you know, the right to information has also been recognized by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights as being part of the Inter-American Convention on Human Rights. And some of the standards there look a little bit vague or of lower standards than we actually find in practice in some countries. And just to give one very technical, but I think a helpful example, it talks about responding to requests for information within 30 business days. But I believe that almost all of the access to information laws in the region have shorter time frames than that for responding to requests. So my question is, do you have some concerns? And I'm asking this recognizing that to get something actually adopted as a treaty is an enormous achievement. So, not to take that away, but it's not easy to get states to agree to good things in treaties. But still, are you a little bit concerned that perhaps some of the standards are not as strong as we would like to see? And for example, in that case, if a case became before the Inter-American Court of a country that had a 45-day calendar day time limit for responding to requests, could they say that was too long since the Escazú Agreement says 30 business days, which is about the same length of time? Is there a risk that it might actually weaken some of the standards that we've achieved in this area?
That's an excellent question. I remember.
Very provocative.
Speaking about timeliness of the responses that are needed. I know
just
that,
for example,
yes, and I am not even going to attempt to answer that one. I'm going to leave it to the legals on the panel. I don't know if Carol or Gabriela would want to tackle that one.
Sure. Just briefly, because I know we're almost out of time, to the first and the last question. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 things. What I learned during the negotiation process is that having spaces for countries to share, as you said, good practices, like we did, for example, on pollutant release registers, leading up to a negotiation to share good practices on public participation in environmental impact assessments was a very integral part of the development of the agreement, and I feel like in this implementation phase, support and capacity building around some of those key issues where many countries are grappling with, it should be an important and could be an important role for a country like Finland to play. Also investing in helping civil society strengthen our skills around negotiations, as you do have had with the Aarhus Convention, because it does require a degree of organization and support on being able to negotiate, for example, the compliance and implementation committee under the agreement that, there are many new actors who have never participated in a treaty negotiation. And thirdly, very importantly, I think, is getting more environmental defenders who are often in rural areas or indigenous peoples involved in understanding how they can use Escazú, why it's important to their struggles and fights. I think I have 3 key areas where it'd be great for a country like Finland to think about how they could share experiences. In regards to Toby's question, what we found in many of the countries in the region is the Caribbean countries, actually their laws are not as strong as those in Latin America. So often in the negotiations we're caught between countries like Mexico and others saying, oh, we only have 12 working days to give a request, and then countries in the Caribbean say, well, we're 35, 40. And so the agreement was kind of like almost, I wouldn't say a battleground, but it was like a compromise between countries that have no laws in the Caribbean, countries that have very advanced laws, and Escazú is somewhere in the middle. So I don't think it lowered standards for the whole region. I think it was a more compromised approach to try and bring all the countries along to have a standardized standard that would work. That's my view on that.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the members of the panel, starting with Gabriela, to respond to other questions or to make closing final comments, because we are out of time.
Yeah, on the comment on Aarhus Convention and the experience of Europe in this, I think how you can help is to share your experiences, mainly regarding the compliance of the convention. Some countries are, like Chile, afraid about the consequences of this treaty, to be sued before international bodies. And yeah, I think it's important to highlight that this is not a punitive mechanism, and one good example is the experience of Europe under this convention. And about the weak standards on access to information, yeah, the civil society was pushing really hard to have the better standards. As Carol said, this was a compromise. So, but the other point is that this is our minimum standard, and all states have to improve from that. So that's the goal of this.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Colasso.
Well, invitation to continue this journey, to keep on pushing countries, keep on pushing people, keep on and getting action out of all these commitments. The example of Finland and Nordic countries, if I just refer to the institution of the ombudsman and the possibility of reinforcing, because the institution of the ombudsman, which is what is ingrained in the Escazú agreement, will be definitely a great push for the countries of the region. There's a lot to do, there's a lot done, and well, in witness of that, we're meeting here, we're speaking about that, and we still have the friends of the Escazú agreement pushing this great coalition of forces behind it. And not last, but very important, ECLAC's guidance and support has been absolutely important.
Thank you very much. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, well, just very briefly, you mentioned capacity building. We will need a lot of capacity building for the implementation of this agreement, so we would like the support of European countries for their capacity building. help us utilizing resources for the implementation. As it was mentioned during this event, many countries are at different levels of development, of law, so that would be very useful for the implementation of the law. And to the Peruvian youth representative, yes, you can do a lot, as Ambassador said. You can start, for example, disseminating the agreement in universities, in schools. It's not worth it if we have a beautiful agreement and nobody knows that it exists, or what can we do? So in our country, it would be key if most students know about the existing practice.
Thank you very much. Inés, algunas palabras finales. Por favor, tiene la palabra.
Muchas gracias a todos por darme esta participación en este espacio. Pues a la comunidad europea, que pues sería muy bueno que nos apoyen a nosotros en Colombia, ya que el acuerdo de Escazú poco es conocido en Colombia, pues creo que no se le ha dado la importancia que debe el gobierno colombiano. Entonces sería muy importante que contemos con su apoyo para generar este espacio en Colombia. También pues a la comunidad internacional que nos apoyen y que generen como esa presión al Estado colombiano para que protejan nuestras vidas como líderes sociales y ambientales en Colombia. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And you know, an important point that Inés has raised, the level of knowledge, level of awareness of Escazú. It's a new agreement, it's a young one, it's not yet well known. I think that that's perhaps one of the most important things that we can do in the interest of our own people and in the interest of advancing environmental justice for our people. To get the word out, Escazú has been adopted, has been agreed by 17 of our member states and counting, and it is going to be very important for us to work to ensure that we have the legal and administrative support on the ground that ensures that, that we protect, that we defend the people, and that we advance environmental justice on the ground in our countries, on behalf of our region, on behalf of the countries individually. I want to thank you all for staying. I know how many competing activities there are going on. It was important for you to have been here. I want to thank the co-sponsors of this event again, the governments of Costa Rica, Peru, WRI, and the other NGO participants, our special guests from Colombia, all of you for participating. On behalf of my Executive Secretary, this ambassador, who was Ambassador Carranza, says, is the heart of this initiative. Thank you for being here, and the best thing that you can do for us is to get the word out. Thank you very much.